weeks back, I saw a post on social media that said, hey, I'm teaching an improv class to people who have social anxiety. Which game should I pick? And the suggestions came right in. And I think the first one was, you should do the game where everyone stands in a circle and one person goes in the middle and they introduce themselves and they act something out. And then the next one was, everyone stands in a circle and you pass a prop around or something and everyone does something different. Typical beginning improv games we've all seen in beginning classes. And but we all know that for newcomers, improv can be scary. And we've seen it, their eyes get really big and their face freezes a bit, and I think they stop breathing a little bit. But let's consider those who have trauma. And there's different kinds of trauma. But something most people who have experienced trauma of some kind have in common is a hyper-awareness of their surroundings, because they sense threat, sometimes threat everywhere. They have a hyper-vigilance, a hyper-arousal. And because of that, therapy usually begins with helping them feel safe and secure. So that social anxiety class with improv, I don't know if those people had trauma or not, but social anxiety is often an outcome of trauma. And we do know, though, they have a hypervigilance in social situations. So how might they feel if they have to stand in the middle of the circle and they have 12, 20, even 40 pairs of eyes staring at them from every angle, and they have to move? Or they're actually standing in the circle, but still all eyes are on them, waiting for them to make that offer. What's their response, reaction? Is that an ideal experience for someone who's hypervigilant? Is it an ideal experience for someone who has trauma? For the last 15 years or so, clinical and educational settings have been embracing trauma-informed care. And the intention of trauma-informed care is to create an environment that will not re-traumatize people who've experienced trauma, and in fact will help them heal. And they embrace certain principles like safety and security, trust, boundaries, choice, autonomy, resilience, collaborative relationships. And it's wonderful, but they face a challenge. And the challenge is this: when people get trained in trauma-informed care, they learn what trauma is, they understand the effects it might have on someone and how that manifests and what those people need. I remember the first time I went through training for a trauma-informed care model. I think it was 2008. And I was amazed. I was like, wow, I had no idea. I wish I knew that information when I was teaching in the classroom. But no one did. And I was on fire. I couldn't wait to get back to work because now I knew, now I understood. And I remember the moment I got back to work, and at this point I was working with foster care youth. And I stood in front of a 17-year-old that I didn't know, and he didn't know me. And it was like that moment you wanted to step out and just go, how do I do this? Yeah. And that's the struggle. They stop at intentions, those trainings. We know what they need. How do we bring it to action? How do we do it? Now we're all sitting here, we know, applied improv. Improv can do it. Improv can supply trust and security, resilience, and collaborative relationships. Applied improv can help trauma-informed care move from intentions to actions. But that's our intention now, isn't it? Because well-intentioned improv facilitators can very easily and inadvertently create threat, so that improv is no longer helpful and potentially detrimental. Now, we know it works. So how do we move from our intention to our action? How do we make sure improv works in those environments? But first, before we look at how, let's just quickly look at why. Why can improv create a trauma-informed care environment so quickly? Yes, I unconditionally, without judgment, accept your verbal, physical, emotional offer. And I find so much value in it, I'm going to add my own to it. Yes, and back and forth. Let's unpack it just a moment longer. If I know that whatever I put out there is going to be accepted, I feel safe. I feel secure. I feel supported. I begin to trust people I may never have trusted before. I begin to trust myself. that what I have to offer has value. I can offer my life, my experience, my choice, my voice, my autonomy. Okay? Yes and provides that frame for social interaction. There's nothing unexpected. All right? I know how I'm going to be received at every moment. Okay? So, yes, improv can do that. It can create a trauma-informed environment quickly. But not all improv games, not all beginning games are the same. Look at those games that we saw at the beginning that were suggested for people with social anxiety. They were not yes and games. They were improvisational. There was acceptance. Yay! There was no and. No one stood in that circle. Potentially, there was a possibility that they weren't attuned and listening and connected and ready to support by adding to an idea. They stood there wondering what they were going to say, if it was going to be okay, how it was going to be received, because those were individual offers. They weren't built off anything. So what do? We choose yes and games, right? Seems obvious. It's improv, yes and, yay. But let's look at that. Let's look at mirroring. We love mirroring. It is an impactful, beautiful, powerful game, right? One person leads a movement, the other person follows back, forth, and together. One leads and one follows. One offers, one accepts, until it's almost seamless, or in cases seamless. Beautiful, yes and. It's based on yes and. Imaginary ball toss. I take a ball, I throw it out. Someone catches it, they transform it a little bit, they throw it back. You know, I add to it again. It's based on yes and. But it's kind of an implicit yes and. It's implied. And what I mean by that is, when they leave, do they leave that exercise thinking, wow, I was unconditionally accepting and listening and adding. I was yes-anding. Or do they leave going, wow, I was really focused and really aware. Is that wonderful? Absolutely. But does focus bring trust? Does focus bring collaborative relationships? Do any of those things do what yes and does to have that understanding? So what do? We do explicit yes and games. And we know these, we got these. There's so many variations. Yes, let's plan a party, right? Yes, and we can have a cake. Yes, and the cake can have icing. Yes, and the icing can glow in the dark. We know this, we got this. But that yes and frame is safe. They know what to expect. Those are some of the safest games that we can choose. And they very quickly, as I spoke about just a moment ago, can create a trauma-informed care environment. Look, we have the opportunity to move trauma-informed care from intention to action by using applied improv. And we have the opportunity to move improv from intention to action by being explicit in how we teach it. A few weeks back, I was doing teaching an adult improv class, and I had a new student come in. And he seemed a little quiet and shy. He was introduced to me as a filmmaker. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know, he's probably comfortable behind the camera. He's probably there to understand what his actors go through or something. And I found out later I was kind of right about my assumptions. But we did the yes and game, and then he got up and he played, and he did the whole time. About an hour and a half. I thought nothing of it. And then I thought nothing of it until 2 a.m. in the morning when I received a 3-page email from him. I forgot to turn my phone notifications off. And he was thanking me. He was thanking me because in his words, it was an incredible life-changing experience. Because he wasn't just a little quiet. He had post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, from his time in the military. And he had a traumatic brain injury from his time in the military and a later motorcycle accident where he spent almost 2 weeks in a coma, which led to cognitive delays. So now every day he wakes up struggling to come up with the right way to say things, the right words, the right grammar. And that has created immense social anxiety in his life. And yet there he was, the first time doing improv, continuously, correctly, and really well. Because improv was accessible to him at that very moment. And because he understood yes and explicitly, it was safe to practice, it was accessible. So let's make improv accessible to those who need it most. Thank you.